Today's podcast is sponsored by my new favorite animated TV show, Tuttle Twins, the first cartoon series to teach kids principles of freedom, economics, and liberty, and to be funny in the process. Nowadays, hidden political agendas are constantly forced on your kids in entertainment and in schools. Tuttle Twins is a hilarious cartoon series that teaches kids about the principles of freedom without being overly preachy. It's educational and hilarious, and there are lots of jokes for adults too. The best part, you can watch Tuttle Twins entirely for free. Just go to TuttleTwins.tv, that is Tuttle Twins, TuttleTwins.tv, and over there you can watch all of the episodes for free. One more time, that's TuttleTwins.tv. Highly recommend it. Go check it out. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Now, on today's episode, we have got on a businessman and a really interesting guy. He is the owner of Texas Business Buyers, and this is Clint Fiore. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Zuby. Thank you for having me on.
Nice one, Clint. So I've done a brief intro there, but you are a guy with a lot of interests, a lot of passions, a lot of businesses and successes. So tell people who are not familiar with you a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I live in Central Texas, married, got a family of 4 beautiful kids. We homeschool. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur that went into mergers and acquisitions. So I've started and sold a few businesses as an entrepreneur, and now I help other people buy and sell companies. I also originally wanted to be a pro pilot, and so that's a passion of mine is aviation, and we could definitely talk about that kind of stuff if you'd like. But I know I have a half of a small plane with a partner. I fly around the country helping people do business deals. But in general, I've just been attracted to you as a fan. You know, I like your music. I like your more than your music. I like your thoughts. You know, and just your voice these last few years during COVID, I thought has been incredible, common sense, and it just makes me feel as that I'm not alone out here as someone that just shares my values and has common sense and isn't caught up in, led around by the nose by the latest media hysteria. And here in Texas, man, life's been pretty good. We've been winning and doing good stuff and doing deals and making money the whole last couple of years. And I've been able to take the family on. In 2020, we did a COVID road trip to like 6 national parks all over the country. And then we flew into Florida in the plane and back a couple times and just enjoying life. And I just know that there's a lot of people like us out there that are just saying, let's keep winning. Let's keep enjoying life and not let the media and our circumstances tell us otherwise, and I know you seem to be a man of faith, and just that faith in God has been a big part for me of just saying, where are we going to put our trust here, and who are we going to listen to here, and are we supposed to walk in fear, or are we supposed to walk in faith, and really just appreciate how you seem to carry that message with such grace and kindness through a global audience. But it definitely resonates with me here in small town Texas.
Nice one, Clint. Thank you, man. I genuinely appreciate that. I do my best. I think it's the best. That's the most each of us can do. We all have different roles to play in this world. And so I'm glad that over the past few years, especially, what I've been doing has been resonating with people. Oftentimes I feel like I shouldn't have to do it. There's so many things I say. I'm like, why do I have to say this? Like, this should be obvious. This should be common sense, but we live in a strange and unique time. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about your background. Are you originally from Texas? Tell me a little bit more about your life story prior to starting all these businesses.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wichita Falls, which is North Texas near the Oklahoma border, and went to school in Arizona. I went to a school called Embry-Riddle, which is if you are anything to do with aviation or aerospace, it's kind of like Harvard. It's a very top aviation aerospace school in the country, and wanted to be a pro pilot. And then in the middle of my school, I ended up in a plane crash and went through some trials and tribulations there, and ended up Long story short, deciding I didn't want to be a pro pilot, but I did want to continue my degree. So I finished a degree in aeronautics, but I minored in business. And then I ended up at the end of college, I kind of had this moment on my faith journey where I rarely feel like God speaks directly to me on anything.
Hmm.
And for some reason, I just had this impression that when I finished college, I wasn't supposed to apply for a job, and that God was going to open my next door. And I just had this very strong impression, and that was against everything inside of me because
Mm.
I am a goal oriented, achievement oriented planner kind of person. And
Hmm.
when God spoke that to me, I hated it because I had this season where I was my senior year of college. I'm going through this, I've got uh, I know you went to a prestigious school. You went to Oxford, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so whenever you're graduating a school like that, it's always, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And everybody has these expectations they put on you. And all my friends are going off to airlines, or they're going to the space industry, or aerospace companies, big jobs. And my mom, who helped me get through college, I was raised by a single mom, and went through all kinds of hell to kind of put me and my brothers through school. And I'm really, really grateful for her getting me out of a bad situation into a good school.
Mm.
And it was like, I just had to tell my mom, sorry, I think God told me I'm not supposed to apply for a job, and he's going to open my next door. And I hated it, but I listened. And when God speaks something directly, I advise you listen, is general advice for anyone listening here. And when I graduated, my phone rang, and it was one of my friends that I used to do some youth ministry work with, and he hooked up with an organization called Rachel's Challenge. Rachel's Challenge is a school program that speaks in high schools and middle schools around the country and tells a story of Rachel Scott. Rachel Scott is the first girl that was killed in the Columbine shootings, April 20th, 1999.
Mm.
And her story made a huge impact on me. I've read her diaries. I had met her family. They had come to my church years before and just made a huge impact on me. And I just had this aviation degree, and my phone rings, and it's my friend saying, "Hey, we want to launch a school program and get this message of kindness and compassion into schools all over the country. Will you join us?" And I just knew that was the Lord saying, "See, I had a thing that you would have never thought of, because you would have ended up, flying or out somewhere else, and missed the boat." And so I
Mhm.
moved to Colorado, and for the next 3 years, I dedicated my life to just helping this program launch nationally. And we ended up, um, when I first started, it was just a few family members of Rachel's that were sharing her story, which is incredible. Her story is incredible. Um, to By the time we were done, we had 30 full-time speakers. We were reaching over 3 million students in live assemblies every year,
Mhm.
and had become the largest school program in the country. And I just helped kind of market that and get it all over the country. And then about halfway through, I became a speaker for them. And so I traveled and spoke and shared her story. And I mean, we got to see, it's an extremely moving message. And I've seen gang members turn in Kellers, lay them on the stage, and just in tears say, I'm changing my life and getting
Mm.
out of the gangs. We had over 20 people that were planning school shootings come forward and say, I'm not going to do a school shooting anymore, that had hit lists
Wow.
and stuff like that. And they were just touched by the legacy of Rachel Scott and her story. Um, Massive numbers of suicides prevented. I ended up just being good friends with Craig Scott, who's Rachel's brother. Craig was in the library at the worst of the shootings. Two friends were killed on either side of him. He had a
Mm.
gun to his head. He's covered in blood and body parts of his friends, and the sprinklers go off right at the split second before they pull the trigger on him.
Mhm.
Distracts them for a minute. They end up leaving the library, and then he's the one that helped lead. He felt like God spoke to him in that moment, says, "Get up, get out of here, and lead people out of here." And he led the
Mhm.
survivors out of the library in this lull in the action before the kids came back and ended up killing themselves, but probably saved a bunch of lives. Craig and I became good friends. We were roommates in Colorado, and I just kind of helped that family get that message of kindness, compassion, um, nonviolence out there,
Hmm.
and that was a huge thing. And then I met a girl during that time, a Colorado girl. I got married. Um, we were wanting to keep working with the organization, but sure enough, we got pregnant pretty quick after we got married, and it just what we were doing hit. There were times where I was in Alaska, she was in New York, and we're traveling all over the country with this program. It just wasn't going to work with a baby, and
Hmm.
I needed to get like a grown up job, and so I ended up getting a job in Texas, and that's what brought me to the Central Texas area, and I've just kind of stuck. We had our first baby here. She's 13 now, and we've had four since. So we're the crazy four kids, four home births, homeschool. We just kind of engineer our life to do everything as much as possible, favoring freedom and living our values and like creating our own destiny
Hmm.
versus so like we have our own businesses. We're not in the public school system. We just kind of make our own decisions and stuff, and definitely optimize towards lifestyle freedom and raising our family the way we want to with the values that we want. But yeah, in between Rachel's Challenge and there, I've done aviation insurance was a job that got me settled into Texas, and then I've
Hmm.
launched a manufacturing business. I launched a tech business, sold those, and then I started a brokerage, and I've helped over 40 companies sell their businesses over the past 7 years, and have just become kind of an expert on business valuations and how to help people buy and sell small businesses, which I think is one of the best opportunities for wealth creation on the planet right now.
Man, that's awesome. There's so much to potentially get into there. The first thing I wanted to ask about actually was a little bit more about this program that you were involved in for several years. So a couple times you mentioned you mentioned the message, but what was the core of the message that had such a strong reaction? I mean, you said suicides prevented, school shootings prevented, gang members giving that up. I mean, that's obviously those are very powerful results. So, what was the core message that was being taken around to all of these different states and cities?
Yeah, so Rachel left behind a series of diaries, and she's, in my opinion, become almost like an Anne Frank character for a new
Mm,
generation. She was 16 years old when she died, but she was just amazing, and her thinking was so mature and advanced. And she wrote like, "You'll never know how far a little kindness can go," and that she wanted to start a chain reaction of kindness. And
mhm,
she wrote about it in her diaries, and she talked about it, but she lived it. And after her funeral, a parade of people came to her family that said, I was eating lunch by myself in the cafeteria, and Rachel saw me and came over and talked to me, and no one had ever done that in 3 years at the school, and she just was so kind to me out of nowhere, and just made me laugh and cared about me. And like that was the day I had a goodbye note written to my family, and pills I was going to take to kill myself, and I never told anybody. And I don't know how she timed it right, but it was like she had these stories of just crazy things that happened
mhm,
that were like you could not explain them. And there's a supernatural element to this, and we had to be careful because it's a public school program, and Rachel was a girl that had tremendous faith, but for to go into public schools, you have to temper your message with secular wordings. And so she wrote things in her diary that like were prophetic, but we
mhm.
would say she had a premonition, or we would use like secular words, but we're not making anything up. We would just share, like, here's the diary that was in her backpack,
Yeah.
hold it up and show it. And then just things like they were moving. It took a couple years before the parents kind of were able to clean out her room, because they were emotionally tore up by it and they didn't want to move stuff around. But they finally, like a couple years after she died, they were moving a dresser out of her room, and I get a little emotional talking about it because
That's all
it's
good,
so
man. That's all good.
at this time, her story, her funeral was the biggest viewing audience in CNN history at the time. Her story had already reached millions of people's lives. Her diaries had been published as the New York Times bestsellers. They moved this dresser, and there was, um, it was probably when she was like 9 years old, I think. She had drawn a outline of her hand, and so she traced her hand on the back of the dresser and
Mhm.
said, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts." And so
That's
they find
awesome.
stuff like this after the fact, and you see it, and you're just like, "Wow!" And then the period before she died, um, you just have to like look it up on their websites or look for Rachel Scott. But she was drawing this picture, and um, her she was daydreaming and drawing, and her teacher said, "Rachel, what are you drawing?" And she said, "It's not finished yet." And but I forgot what she said, but it was like she just knew it was significant.
Mhm.
And they found this in the back of her diary. It was in her backpack, and it had bullet holes through it where she had been shot.
Wow.
And Daryl Scott, who became a mentor of mine, Rachel's dad, he
Mhm.
got a call from a businessman in Ohio who didn't know the family, and he said, "I saw your daughter's funeral. Um, I've been having this recurring dream, and I can't shake it. Does this mean anything to you? I see Rachel's eyes in the sky, and they're crying, and tears are falling, and the tears are watering something. Does that mean anything to you?" And Daryl was like, "No, dude. Like, leave me alone," because
Mm.
but he was a Christian guy. He kept
Mm.
having this dream like distinctly over and over and over again. Rachel's eyes in the sky, crying, tears falling, watering something. And then Daryl got the. It took a while to get her diary and her backpack out of the police evidence. So it was probably like a month or two later. He wants to see the last thing she wrote, and gets the diary out, turns to the back page, and there's a picture, and it's her eyes crying, tears are falling, and the tears hit this rose. The rose is growing out of a columbine flower.
Mhm.
So you've got a columbine flower, you've got a rose, which is the flower of the United States. The tears turn to drops of blood when they hit the leaves of the rose. And there's 13 teardrops, and there's 13 people killed that day in the shooting, and that was the last thing she drew before she died. And it's just,
What?
yeah, it's just
I've never heard this story before. I'm surprised I haven't heard this.
yeah, it's all like factual, verifiable stuff, and we don't make anything up. We just share like, here's the call that came in, here's the dude that called, here's what was found in the diary, here's what she said. And then there was even things where 11 months before she died, her shortest diary entry was, um, "This will be my last year, Lord. I've gotten what I can. Thank you."
Man,
11
that's
months before she died. And so, I mean, just stuff like that. There's a lot of things where it just hits you, just the powerfulness of this. But her message is all about starting a chain reaction of kindness and compassion and
mhm.
touching the hearts of people. And we think, and I still to this day think the ultimate solution to violence is love. Like, if you love people, you don't want to kill people. And if you
Mhm.
can learn to look for the best in others, you'll find it. If you look for the
Mhm.
worst in others, you'll find it. And we teach people in that program to kind of reach out to those that are overlooked, to make sure that you and share like how you feel about people, and just to start a chain reaction of kindness in their school and in their workplace.
I hear that, man. That's a lot of powerful stuff right there. I mean, I think something that's so interesting about that chain reaction idea is it works both ways, right? You know, it works with both positivity and negativity. It works with both love and with hate. If someone approaches you or speaks to you in a hostile or derogatory fashion, the natural thing is to reflect that back. But if
Hmm.
someone treats you kindly and speaks to you with love and compassion and empathy, then it's natural to, you know, shine that back. And I think that there are many of these lessons which, you know, most of us learn as children, or they say, you know, like so much stuff that you need to know in terms of social skills you probably learn by the age of 5 or 6, to be honest. But as you get older and you get more jaded by the world and you see all these awful, negative, nasty things happening and people not treating each other well on a daily basis, offline, online, everywhere, it's a constant challenge to not get dragged into the negativity. Like that's something that's been a big that's a challenge for me, actually, an ongoing challenge with what I do, because I'm in this very unique and weird position where I'm interacting with millions of people now on a daily basis. So through social media, and then of course, you know, I also have my music, which reaches thousands of people. I've got my podcasts, which reach millions of people, if I'm including my appearances on other people's. And it's strange because it kind of puts you in this target. It puts you in this spotlight
Yeah.
where there's so much positivity, right? Like you reach and impact so many people in such a positive way. You connect with great people all around the world. But also, even if you are positive, like my overall message is positive and always has been, I don't go out there, you know, trying to spread hate or anything like that. But you still get this level of vitriol where thousands of people are out there who, you know, think that they hate you, or, you know, they don't understand what you're doing, or they're just mad and you just happen to be the person who they're seeing out there. And you have to, it's this fine line between becoming tough and thick-skinned enough to not deal with it, but also being very cautious not to become the monster yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's talked about a lot. And I think, you know, I can only imagine for, I don't know, the Joe Rogans and Jordan Petersons or Ben Shapiro's of the world, who have, you know, tens of millions of people who are following them and know who they are, just how what that level is like. But it's a strange transition because for me it's relatively new. I've been doing what I do with music since 2006, but it's only since 2019 that things really started to escalate. And, you know, nobody in the USA used to know who I was. I used to just have, you know, a small audience in the UK, and now
Yeah.
it's this global thing, and every day it's growing by the thousands. And it's a it's a battle, but I think that message of the kindness chain reaction is really important. And it's not I've never thought of it as a chain reaction. I tend to think of it as like ripples, you
Yeah.
know, like a positive ripple or a negative ripple that goes outwards, and then, you know, that creates other ripples and waves, and it kind of just spreads out that way. But I think it's a really important thing for all of us to consider, whether someone's in the public spotlight or not. I think it's a very important idea.
When you're out and about, just a smile can change someone's day. Like,
Absolutely.
and it's almost impossible if someone smiles at you with a full on smile to not smile back.
Dude, this is
And
one reason I hate masks.
yeah, it's
Like, I'm
it's
keeping it
actually a
real.
real tragedy.
It's
It's a real
actually,
tragedy that we lose our
yeah,
smiles,
yeah.
behind a mask. And so like just that it's been studied. Like it literally changes your body chemistry when you
Hmm.
smile and when you receive a smile, and it can change everything. And it does create that ripple effect where you're more likely to smile at another person, and it does just fan out like
Hmm.
ripples when you do that. And it's the simple things like that that people don't know how much of an impact they're making. And
Yes.
Rachel's story had such a, a crazy impact because all those people came forward after her death that
Hmm.
they never told her while she was alive. But after she died, person after person came forward and told the family just how a small act of kindness that Rachel probably forgot about the next day was the turning point in their life,
Hmm.
and how and so yeah, that's what that message is all about, man. But I really admire you and how like you do of course on Twitter where I see you the most draw out a lot of haters and people saying all kinds of stuff, and like you seem to handle it with humor and grace, and I'm sure you make mistakes like we all do, but I hope that you keep that spirit up, that, and I just want to encourage you in that, and just kind of handling people with kindness, and directing people to the truth, because this world is jacked up, man. Like how
Mhm.
polarized we're all getting, and how little nuance there is in the conversation. Anytime you get around politics, polarization,
Mhm.
there might be, I think you talked about this on one of your other shows, but in the United States, we really struggle with this because everybody wants to be in one party or the other,
Yes.
and with the two-party system, it just sucks because there might be 200 issues that are important,
Mhm.
and someone that's on another political party than me, we may see eye to eye on literally half of them.
Mhm.
But if the second you raise your head and make one statement that makes them think you believe one thing about one of those 200 things, then they're going
Mhm.
to assume all you're on the whatever their stereotype is for the other 200 things are all apply to you. When I'm
Yes.
like, man, I'm all over the board on these topics. Like
Sure.
I'm not neatly heads or tails on all these things like you're assuming I am. And we don't have time to talk about this in one tweet right now,
Yeah.
but you're just going to write me completely off as a human being and my
Mhm.
value, and because of one thing I said, and that's a real tragedy. But I think that if you can just keep getting your message out there, and like, and letting people know, yeah, you're not fitting into the exact stereotype of what you might think. um, and we do have more common ground. I think when you get people face to face and
Yes.
you go sit down across the table with someone that's opposite of you, or you think is opposite of you politically,
Mhm.
more often than not, you've got more things in common than you'd ever dream of, and it's almost impossible to hate someone once you're
Yes.
able to hear the nuance, once you get to hear their heart and where they're coming from
Mhm.
and why they believe that. And so I think it's kind of an art form we need to revisit, is like having more face to face conversations, having more long form talks with people that disagree with you versus just writing people off wholesale.
Absolutely. There's so much to be said on that. And people don't hate you, or it's the caricature of in their brain they have of you, especially in this online social media world, right? Whenever you see someone, I don't know, with 100,000 plus, followers, or even 50,000, even 10,000, right? People people caricaturize you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they have this idea of who you are and what you believe and your background and everything. Like people mind read all the time. They think they know
Mm-hmm.
so much stuff about you, and oftentimes they're really way off, right? Especially over the past 2 years, I've seen some of the craziest stuff written about me. Because sometimes I don't know if people think you can't see it, right? Like, but
Yeah,
you can see it. Like, even if you're not tagged in it, like if there's this whole conversation going on and it's literally about me, it's like you guys know I can see this, right?
yeah.
And there'll just be all this stuff, people that's making stuff up. This is one of the weirdest things I found, is that at a certain level, people just start completely making stuff up about you, like
Mm-hmm.
completely fabricated, not like a misunderstanding, like they just make something up out of whole
Mm-hmm.
cloth. And I'm just like, this is so weird. And the hardest thing to deal with is not, for me personally, is not the hate. It's not criticism. It's not stupid comments or whatever. It's actually um, getting. You have to accept that some people are just going to have a completely incorrect and messed up view about you,
Yeah.
and lies will spread about you. Things will spread about you. There are categories, you making stuff up about you, spreading all kinds of nonsense, slandering your name, and you cannot defend yourself against all of it. You can't jump into every single conversation and debate and show evidence and explain who you are and what you believe. And that's the hardest part. I don't like, I'm a good-hearted person, right? I do my best to improve myself and improve other human beings, whether I know them or I don't, mentally, physically, spiritually, encourage people to be better critical thinkers. Literally everything I do is trying to uplift, motivate, and inspire other people. And it's been the case for over 15 years. So when I see someone trying to make the claim that, oh, Zuby is some
Mm-hmm.
bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, misogynistic, horrible person who is friends with white supremacists, and he has this evil agenda, and he's funded by this person and that, and it's like every single part of what they're saying is completely wrong. And also people are buying into it. You can see their followers like, oh really, oh yeah, he's a bad guy, whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? You want to jump in and be like,
Yeah.
yo, what's wrong with you people? Like, this is not who I am. But you have to just be able to see that and go, okay, that kind of sucks. That's not who
I
I
hate
am. That's not what I believe. But I can't totally nip this in the bud.
I hate for you that that's so visible when that happens, because I do believe for every time some outlandish slander like that happens, there's 1,000 people like me that just already know that's dumb
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
already know that's ridiculous,
Yeah.
and we've got your back and we know the truth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Thank you.
we're quiet. I'm not always loud, and that's a lot of your best supporters. They're not getting in your face, right?
Mm.
And they're just listening to you respectfully, and they're hearing you out. And so I hope that you are encouraged by just knowing how many more are with you than against you,
Oh
in
yeah,
this
for sure.
message, because you really are resonating in such a down to earth, common sense way that you've got little families in Texas and they're suburban rocking out to your music, singing along
Awesome.
and stuff, and you're making an impact.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I need the reminder once in a while because
Yeah,
it's sometimes it can feel brutal. You have different days, Sometimes it's all good
yeah.
and you're feeling all the love, and sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh, like what is going on here today? But coming back to some of the things you were talking about, I'm really interested about how you have set everything up in the way you have with your career, your family, the independence aspect, the freedom aspect. I think the way you've done it is a lot of people's dream and aspiration. I think especially in this time period with so many people realizing the importance of being independent and not
Mhm.
relying on all these different things. A lot of people are very interested now in the idea of homeschooling. That's
Mhm.
gone way up. It used to be a kind of fringe, weird idea, but now I'm hearing more and more people, even in the UK. Like homeschooling's never been popular in the UK, but even in the UK, I'm hearing more people like, maybe we should try this homeschooling thing. So is that something you very deliberately set up with your wife and with your family, or is it something that over time, you kind of felt it was necessary to do that?
100%. It's by design. I told my wife in our wedding vows, I said, well, something to the effect of like, we're probably at different points going to be extremely rich and extremely poor. We're going to make huge mistakes. And like, the only thing I can promise you is that we're going to go for it. Like,
Mm,
my biggest fear has always been normal. Like,
mm,
I don't want to live a life that's just normal, that's just kind of following the script, doing, showing up the way everyone says you're supposed to. Like, normal is not good. It's
mhm,
just not. It's not the best of what God wants for us. And I would rather look like a fool from time to time and fall on my face from time to time than just look back at the end of my life and the very limited time that God gave me, and wonder, what if I'd actually tried? What if I'd actually taken a risk? And what if I tried to like listen to God and do what He says, and do things by His standards and not the world's standards? And I've just always been, I was school was a game to me. It was, how can you get the A, because that's what people want you to get to the next thing in the game. And I just gamed it. Like, I ended up going to a school that was way out of our price range by getting a full academic scholarship, not because I worked the hardest or was the smartest, just because I understood the game and how to play the game.
mhm,
And once you get to grown up world, like, you can game school like crazy. And I gamed the heck out of it. I got my pilot's license for free when I was in high school by going to an inner city magnet school that had an aviation program. And if you
mhm,
followed the game correctly, you got to get your pilot's license. And so, like, I figured that out. And I wanted to fly, but we couldn't afford to fly. And so you just figure it out. You figure out the game, right? And then I leveraged that into, I got to go to NASA my senior year of high school. I got to ride on the Vomit Comet, the KC-135 zero gravity trainer, where they train the astronauts in zero gravity
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
So I got some really cool experiences from just my academic career, doing well and learning how to get. My report card would be nothing over a 91, but I would all be A's, because that's how you were graded on the GPA,
Mhm.
and so anything that was like a 92 or a 95, that's wasting energy, right? That's wasting energy. So I would just cram, I would figure out what is the score I need to make on my final to make the A. If I already had a 98 in the class, I'd figure out you only needed a 70 on this, so I wouldn't study at all. And then the class I was going to be in, I'd cram for that one, and then I'd game it, so where you get straight A's, get your scholarships, write the essays, say the words, show up, all these things. But it was always a game.
Mhm.
But you can use the game to your advantage if you can just think like, if you can think about life as a video game. And this is what I think a lot of people that are winners in life do, is they victims think they're a character in a movie, and you're
Mhm.
just you're just watching this movie unfold that is your life. And the people that are out there winning and making things happen, they see it as the world is unlimited, and this is all a video game. You might as well
Mhm.
have fun, and you might as well play it to the best of your abilities, and search and find all the loot and treasures and all these things, and just make the world your playground. And I kind of learned to do that. But then when you get out of school and you get into adulthood, I was never a good fit for, and this is why I was trained to be an airline pilot. I mainly did that because I looked up and I saw planes and I thought that was cool, and I wanted to fly airplanes. But when I
Mhm.
got to be bigger, I realized like that is actually a cog in the machine. Like that is a bus driver of the sky with lots and lots of rules, and you're climbing a seniority ladder for decades, and you don't have control of your schedule. You don't have control of your life.
Mhm.
You just kind of check the check boxes, and I realized like I'm too creative for that. I'm not the real rule follower. I'll I'm a responsible pilot. I'll follow the safety rules and stuff like that. But it's a matter of just lifestyle design. Like you don't have
Mhm.
control, and that's why I never went into the military. I don't want somebody telling me to wake up at this hour, make my bed this way. If it doesn't make sense, I don't want to do it. And so you get into adulthood, and you just realize like, wow, this life is really anything you want it to be. And if you can just realize that, I don't care who you are, where you're from, if you can think about it that way, that the world is unlimited, it can be anything that you want it to be, and that you can design the exact kind of life you want. It might take some time,
Mhm.
and it's going to require kind of setting up the dominoes uh, of a sequence of events that has to happen. You may have to reverse engineer a lot to get from
Mhm.
where you're at right now to where you want to be, and that may be a long ways off. But just thinking like that, um, reading lots of books. I think the best education I've got was after college. I started reading just tons of business books, and one book called The One Thing has been instrumental. It's a really good book as far as just the right way to think about setting yourself up for success. Uh,
Mhm.
so I may recommend some of those along the way. But um, while I got you, man, I got a couple other stories. I don't know if you want me to talk about the. I've got kind of like a spiritual vision that I thought was kind of fun that I've never told anyone
Share it with us, man. Share it. I'm all ears.
about. And then I've got the plane crash story, which is always the crap. Plane
Okay.
crashes are always the crowd pleaser.
Okay. Let's talk about both.
Okay. Um, I'll do the plane crash story first. Just the quick version is uh, I'm in college. It's 2003, and I'm flying by myself in a Cessna to I'm based in Prescott, Arizona, and I'm going to Las Vegas and Laughlin and back in a big triangle, and building time towards my commercial rating. And I'm just flying over the desert. It's a late November day. It's November 29th, and um, everything's fine, but I'm ahead of schedule. And so that means I've got to build a certain number of hours to get my next checkbox for my next thing, and And if I get back too early, I'm going to have to do another flight. And so I just decided to do a little sightseeing. I deviate from my planned flight, which is fine. It's not illegal to do that, flying by yourself. And I fly over the desert and I'm sightseeing around. I find this old abandoned airfield with some cool, remnants of airplanes on it. And I'm just like sightseeing over the northwest Arizona desert. And then after I burned off about 30 minutes of time, I put in GPS direct straight back to Prescott. Between me and there is a mountain range. And I was in the low desert and I needed to climb up and clear the mountains to get over them and get to Prescott. I everything's going fine. It's clear day. And as I got closer to the mountains, I just noticed my plane started to degrade in performance. I wasn't making the climb rate that I thought I should. I was kind of running through my instruments. Everything looked green. There was nothing wrong, but I just wasn't climbing. And I couldn't figure out why. And as I got closer and closer to the mountains, it was like things just started getting worse and worse. To now I'm losing altitude. I'm losing energy. And I'm thinking this is moving from a curiosity to potentially an emergency. And I need to get back to low ground, to away from these jagged mountains in case I have to put down. But I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And I make a turn around this gentle hill, which I think is going to lead me back to where I came from. And it was the fateful wrong decision. It was a dead end. I turned into a funnel, basically a box canyon of rising terrain.
Mm.
And that is in Arizona almost an unsurvivable situation. I flew into a canyon that you couldn't turn around, and I was given it all the beans. I had it pegged full power. I aimed for the lowest saddle of the ridgeline and just hoping that this plane's going to climb because the engine's running. It should
Mhm.
climb. It's not climbing. And I heard my stall horn go off and I'm losing energy. And I'm just realizing, oh crap, I'm not going to make it out of here. So I gave up on clearing the mountains because I was just kept sinking. And I realized I'm going to have to crash this plane the best that I can. And I flew. I maintained, airspeed to keep control. I flew as far as I could down the canyon, and then I just made a 90-degree left-hand turn into the left canyon wall, which was about a 50-degree upslope covered in boulders. And I'm hands on the throttle, hands on the controls. I I just keep flying the plane. I know I don't want to stall and nose in. I don't want to spin or lose control. And so I just fly at this wall, and right as it's about to hit, I bring that yoke all the way back into my lap and try to just basically power on, stall it into the side of this wall.
Mhm.
I hit. I remember the sound being overwhelming, loud noise, and the next instant, I I remember I'm outside of the plane. I'm laying on the ground. I'm under the wing of this plane, and I have no idea how I got out.
Wow.
There's a waterfall of fuel coming out of the left wing. The plane is demolished. The gear is gone. The tail's crumpled. The windshield is gone. The engine cowling from the front is about 200 feet up the mountain. It just went off.
Wow.
All the instrumentation where I was sitting shattered. The rudder pedals where my feet were are gone because a boulder came through the floor and was where my feet should have been. And I'm on the ground outside the plane. No clue how I got out of the plane. I stand up, pat myself off, and I'm like, okay, I'm not hurt, but the plane is gushing fuel. And I think it's going to, because I went in full power, I think it's going to catch on fire,
Yeah.
blow up. And like I'm in the middle of the desert, high desert, and I'm like, man, I need to get the survival kit out. And so I just reached into the tail, grabbed this little survival kit, and got away, and just
Mhm.
stood back. And the plane didn't blow up, and it didn't fall down the mountain. It just hit and stuck, but
Wow.
it just crumpled into a heap. I then took it time to pat myself down and look for injuries. I thought I was in shock, I was going to be seriously hurt, and
Mhm.
like my shirt had holes in it. I still have the shirt. I had holes in my pants, and I didn't have a scratch on my whole body. Like all the glass from the instruments had to have flown by my face. I didn't have a cut
Hmm.
on my face. I didn't have a
Wow.
cut on my hands. And I sincerely believe that an angel pulled me out, or there was something supernatural that happened, because I have zero recollection of how I got out of that plane. And the FAA examiners that saw the crash site, they saw the site first, and then they saw me, and they said, "We were you really the one flying that plane? Because
Wow.
we don't believe it. Because first off, we've seen Box Canyon crashes in Arizona, and we've never seen a single survivor.
Wow.
And if you did survive, your back should be broken at minimum. You should be
Hmm.
in the hospital with tubes sticking out of you right now, because just the G forces of flat pancaking onto that wall of that canyon should have broke my back, or seriously injured me all in all kinds of ways. Should have had my legs should have been pinned in there. My back should have been broken. I had not a scratch. I
Hmm.
hiked up the mountain. My plane's deep in this canyon, and I was able to build um, signals. So I had this like solar blanket, and I built a flag on top of one of the canyon on one of the peaks nearby, and then I had this little orange tube tent, and I made like a windsock on top of these two peaks, and I just set up there on the top of these mountains, and it was like I was on Mars. There was nothing around. I could look 360 degrees, and there's not a road, there's not a source of water, and it's November 29th at 8,000 feet in the desert. And so I still thought I might die, and I still felt like very surreal, like I'm probably going to die, but I was really grateful that I survived the crash, because um, it kind of goes back to like that lesson from Rachel's challenge of like, you don't realize how important it is to say to the people you love how you feel. And I set out there and wrote goodbye letters to like everybody. I wrote goodbye letters to my my parents, to my siblings, to my friends, and I had a little pocket New Testament, and I read some of the Bible, and I was just so grateful that like even if I die, I'm gonna get to say what I never said to these people that matter in my life. And I even committed that when I get back, if I make it out of here, no matter what, I'm going to give them these letters. And it transformed my family from like we were the like the handshake family, very not very affectionate, and now like we hug and share our feelings way better. And that's one of the lessons from Rachel's challenge and from the plane crash. And if I could tell your listeners one thing that's just a no brainer, you got to do it, is make a list of, say, the 5 people in your life that you care most about, and just tell them. An easy way to do that is to write a letter, write handwritten notes, and
Hmm.
just make sure that do it now and then revisit it in a few years, do it periodically. Just make sure the people that you love, that you never know. Like I didn't know November 29th, 2003, like I thought that was going to be my last day on this planet. When I looked down that canyon, I knew what I was looking at, and when I knew I had to crash, it was just like I'm pretty sure I'm about to die, Lord, and I had no idea that was going to happen.
Hmm.
And I think that surviving through that and the gratefulness, and I've lost friends in the plane crashes that weren't as bad as mine,
Sure.
and I don't understand God, and I don't always understand why I stayed and other people have lost under similar circumstances. But don't take it for granted. Don't take your life for granted. It's the best gift, and make sure that you don't take those that you love for granted around you, and that you share how you feel with those that you may never get a chance to. Because I was just so grateful to have that chance, and so that's one challenge I want to throw down to the Real Talk Nation out there. It's
Yeah,
just like
man.
make
Dude,
sure you do that.
it's powerful, man. I mean, it's funny whenever I talk to my family on the phone, if I'm around people who don't know me, they always comment on this because I don't put down the phone without like a very clear
Yeah,
"I love you," right?
yeah,
Like, and people always say, you like, oh, that's so sweet. You like tell your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister. They're like that. They're like that. People always comment on it. They're like, that's nice. I'm like, yeah, man. I mean, one day. I don't like to even think this way. I don't like to be morbid. I don't like to dwell on our mortality, but it's like, yo, like, none of us are going to live forever,
Hmm.
right? So if I love you, I'm telling you, right? Like I love you. Right? There will be some time. There will be some time in my life where it is the last time I
Hmm.
talk to my mom, or I talk to my dad, or I talk to this person. You know, Lord willing, that is not anytime soon. But we don't know, right? We don't know. Human beings are mortal, especially as people get older. When people
Hmm.
get into their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like, the older you are, the more likely it is in any given year that that person is going to pass away. That's just like a law of mathematics and biology. So I think, to me, that's not something that's negative. It's something that's positive. I actually think it's really important for us to think about our own mortality and to
Hmm.
think about the mortality of other people around us. Because in my opinion, if you frame it the right way, it makes you treat people better. It makes you live your own life better because you recognize, you know, hey, I'm gonna die, right? Like, nothing motivates me more than that simple thought. Yo, I'm gonna die, right? So while I'm here,
Yeah.
let me do as much as I can. Let me help as many people as I can. Let me inspire and motivate and help, and let me not leave lots of things on the table. Let me put this out there because I don't know, right? I hope I get many, many more decades to go and I get to live a long, lengthy, healthy life. But I do not know. There are people my age or younger who, through freak accidents or freak
Hmm.
illnesses or this or that, all kinds of things can happen. Life is so unpredictable. I think that's why, to take a famous story. I mean, remember the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash,
Yeah.
right? That hit people so hard. I think not just because it was a celebrity death, but because this is someone in their prime, their physical prime,
Yeah.
their peak of their career, famous, well loved individual, and then just one day, just gone, just like
Yeah.
that, just gone, you know? And it makes people reflect and go, wow, okay. So in one way, that's really, really sad. And it's a tragedy, of course. But for someone who is seeing that, you can look at that and go, wow, okay, that's a reminder. That's a reminder of how I should live my life and how I should treat other people. And maybe I should be more forgiving, and I shouldn't hold these eternal grudges, especially not against people in my own family or friends or whatever. It's like, just put all that stuff to the side, forgive people, because we're not here for all that long.
It's after the plane crash, it was like everything that mattered was crystal clear and everything that didn't matter was crystal clear. And I felt like a disembodied spirit for a few days, just kind of like floating over my life, watching myself go through life. And it was amusing just because it just becomes so clear, like everything you get all bent out of shape about that like doesn't matter at all in light
Hmm.
of eternity and in light of what really matters in life and death stuff just seems laughable. It just seems so funny. And the things that really matter. And the only thing that for me, the only thing that it was God and people. Like in the
Hmm.
end, God and people are all that matters. Like everything else fades away. Everything else is noise.
Hmm.
And and so like I just think if you can keep that perspective when things get tough or when you're facing hard decisions, one thing that I love about Craig Scott, my friend I mentioned earlier, with his near death experience in Columbine and my near death experience in the plane crash, was that we just had a ball. Like we had so much fun in life, just being silly and doing things outside the norm just to give people a laugh because who cares? Like what doesn't matter doesn't really matter. And um, if you can go through life, like I've lived almost, I view it like I'm in extra innings or I'm like bonus time because I think I was like 19, 20 when I had the plane crash, and I'm
Hmm.
38 now. So I've almost lived like two lives from what like I feel like I should have by all scientific accounts. Like I should have
Mm.
died in that crash. Um, and now it's like I've almost doubled up, man. Like I can't lose. So I feel like moving forward from this year, like I'm playing on house money, you know, I'm like the gambler that's up, and I've banked my buy-in, and I literally can't lose. And it helps you move without fear. It helps you be a
Mhm.
risk taker. It helps you design a life that you want to live. It helps you in entrepreneurship. Um, and so, yeah, for those of you that are thinking about like making a big change,
Mhm.
I help people buy businesses. I help people sell businesses, and those are always like huge chapters of change in people's lives. When I left my career, where I had benefits and a salary, and I had a wife and a baby, and a mortgage and all the things, it was scary to step out. I did an angel-backed startup um, in an industry I'd never been in, and it was like I just had to look at my wife Melissa and be like, "Look, we said we were going to go for it, right? Like we said, we shook on it, we said our vows, like we're going to try." And I realized like this sales job, I was selling aviation insurance. So I was like, insurance is always going to be here, right? Like you can always get a job selling insurance. Like what would you want to look back and say I didn't take that leap of faith to try? And
Mhm.
so if you can go through life just realizing like if you're trying to leave a corporate job, like corporate jobs will always be there. Um, like all these things we're afraid of leaving, they'll take you right back if you need to. But don't be afraid. Don't look back on your life and say I didn't try or I didn't go for it when you had a chance.
Hey, man, this is me leaving my corporate job in November 2011 to go become a
Yeah,
full-time rapper. And
yeah,
that's literally what it was. It was, if I don't do this, do I want to be that guy in his 30s or 40s or 50s who's kicking himself going, oh, you know what? I used to be a rapper,
yeah,
I used to do this. And that's like, oh, and people go, oh, interesting, really. And it's like, what? I gotta do this. And I know I'll reach some level of success. How high that ceiling is, or if there's a ceiling, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But I remember when I left my job, and some people who didn't really understand my mindset were like, oh, well, how long are you going to give it? And I'm like, no, you don't get it. I'm done.
yeah,
That's it. It's over. Right. This is when I was like 24, 24. And I was like, no, that's it. I'm not, you're going to try for 1 year. You're going to try for two. It's like, no, I'm doing this until, a dam is going to break. I
yeah,
don't know exactly what it's going to look like, when it's going to happen. And then, yeah, for me, a big transition year was 2019.
yeah,
2019 was when things really started to grow in an exponential fashion. I started this podcast, wrote and released my first book independently, had lots of my posts start to go viral, got the opportunity to go on Joe Rogan and then connect with Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. Oh, now I'm on Tucker Carlson. Oh, suddenly I'm in the Pentagon and I'm in the White House and I'm talking to all these crazy people. And for the next couple of years, it's like it just continues to grow and the message is reaching and resonating with more people. And ironically, I think that a lot of what has also happened is the world has just shifted.
yeah.
So my message, the message I have to offer the world, is more necessary now than it was in 2007 or
Mhm.
2010 or 2013. So not only have I honed my own work and my skills and my ability to articulate my thoughts, but also the world has just shifted to a stage where it's like, okay, we need people like that now. We need that type of thinking and articulation and positive message and inspiration. You know, it just wasn't as necessary. So sometimes you've got to keep going and things shift in your favor, but also the world around you changes, and sometimes you can kind of keep doing the same thing. This is what I found. You kind of keep going and the world shifts to a point where it's like, okay, this person is now needed. I feel the same thing about, I really feel this with someone like Jordan Peterson,
Yeah,
right? I think 10 years prior the message would have resonated, but it wouldn't have seemed so profound and necessary, and people have this hunger and thirst
yeah,
for knowledge and critical thinking and these ideas and going back and revisiting some of these older ideas and expanding on them. Whereas now there's just this dearth of all of this, right? We're supposed to
Mhm.
live in this simple binary false, everything's a binary, everything's a false dichotomy. People
Mhm.
don't want to think. It's just trust the experts, trust the leaders, follow the science, don't do any thinking. In fact, if you think, we're going to ban you, censor this, deplatform that. And it's like people are hungry for, and as you said at the beginning of the conversation, that makes people feel lonely.
Mhm.
Plus, people have been physically isolated for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So, especially, it's been very rough, especially for people in certain countries or cities, or people who don't have families. Like, a lot of people have basically been on their own for a ridiculous amount of time.
Mhm.
So, I think while there's been all this polarization and division and isolation, it's also created this opportunity for all of these disparate people, all different backgrounds from different places in the world, to find each other and
Mhm.
to connect. And so I've never seen the sort of level of community that I'm seeing now. While I'm also seeing the division and all the nastiness and stuff, I'm also seeing this, like, this light starting to glow and
Yeah.
grow. And I don't know exactly what that looks like or exactly what's going to happen with it, but I think it's exciting.
You travel all over the world. Is it safe to say this is a global thing, right? This is
Man,
everywhere.
people don't people really underestimate how global it is. That's the
Yeah.
thing. But both on both sides of this, right? People don't realize that for the past 2 years, most of the world. I mean, you've been in Texas. Texas has literally been one of the best places in the entire world to be over the last 2 years. Some places to this day, there's places now that are still in lockdown right now. Right now, as we record this place is still in lockdown. You can't go
Yeah, I
outside. You can't
travel
hang out.
around and I forget that there's people.
You
I'm like,
forget.
"Oh,
Yeah,
you
there's
guys are."
people who haven't seen their There's people who have not seen their families
Yeah.
since this whole thing started. Haven't seen their friends. Haven't been able to leave their countries or even leave their province in
Yeah.
some cases. So it's really weird, whereas other people, it's almost like it never happened or it never started and everything's just normal. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But you have to remember, like, people underestimate just
Yeah.
how big this whole thing has been.
So I had this vision I wanted to share. It's like totally goes with what you were just saying about the global nature of this thing.
Mhm.
And I've never told anyone this outside of just close family or friends. And so it's kind of funny saying it on this stage.
Go ahead.
Um, on social media and stuff, I'm pretty much like sticking to business topics, and faith comes out now and then. But have you ever had a vision where you feel like you saw a vision?
Um, Actually, no, I haven't. Not that I can recall.
It's like I've only had once or twice in my life where I feel like that was a vision, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't have context of it. It's almost like a daydream. It's almost like you're watching a movie in your mind, but you have this sense that what you're watching is supernatural. Like it's not coming from you. And I had this weird experience where I was a newlywed, and it was like my wife and I kind of got it at the same time, where she was getting this picture, and I was almost getting like an interpretation of the picture as she was describing it. And it was something I kind of forgot about, but I was racking my brain. I was like, what should I talk about with Zuby? With your audience, with this time in history when we're sitting together, I'm like, my normal stuff, talking about SBA loans and doing business in Texas and stuff like that. I'm like, it's not quite the right thing to say, and I feel like it was just put on my heart that I should share this. But we were at this conference in probably like '06, '07. Or it had been '07 because I got married in '07. We just had our 15-year anniversary. Um, we were beside this pool in Phoenix and talking to this couple from South America about spiritual stuff and the state of the church. And we were just having like a cool, like far reaching, young dreamer, poolside spiritual conversation. And my wife she was been to India on a mission trip recently at the time. And she had seen this phenomena of like she was in Chennai, or she was there like after the tsunami and in the cleanup effort after in southern India,
Hmm.
and she saw like she reported back how she saw thatched huts being in the shadow of skyscrapers, and sometimes you'd even see a skyscraper with a thatched hut on it, like on the roof, and just this weird mixture of old and new India in the places where she went. And while we were talking, we were just kind of addressing like, what is the kingdom? And we're again, we like to challenge everything and ask like, are we doing? Is the way that church is done the right way to do it? Is the way that school is done the right way to do it, or is there a better way? You know, we're always asking those types of questions, and that leads you to some interesting paths in life. And the picture that she got, which we think was a vision, was um, she imagined like the whole earth is covered in Stone Age people living in thatched huts with no technology. And so just imagine the earth thousands of years ago before major cities and civilization. And everyone's in thatched huts. And she zooms out and sees the earth from space. And from space come these massive steel I beams that are massive, and they just impale themselves into the planet from all directions. But from your perspective, you're on the earth in one of those thatched huts, you could only see one of them. But when you zoomed out to space, it's like needles sticking in huge, massive I beams that
Hmm.
went all the way into space. And so when these Stone Age people see them, they just boom, embedded themselves into the earth. And when you go to the base of it and look up, it stretches all the way into the sky. You can't even see the top. And then she saw the humans react, and she saw three reactions. And the first reaction was fear. And it was people, they wanted to stay in their thatched huts, and they wanted to say, don't go near those things. We don't know what that is, but it's probably dangerous, and you should not go anywhere near them. And so it was like a warning, it was fear. And there was a second reaction. And the second reaction was this person wanders out of their thatch hut. They go up to it, they knock on it, they see it's super strong and super solid, more than any stronger than anything they've ever seen. And they realize, like, this is surely from God. This must be from God. And so I have an idea. And so they kind of rounded up their friends, and they gathered a whole bunch of thatch. And then they used that I beam as a center support structure to build the biggest thatch hut the world had ever seen, with that as like the center support. And so imagine a thatched hut that's 100 times bigger than any other thatched hut because you built it around that big steel I beam, right?
Hmm.
And then there was a third reaction. And the third reaction was a humble person that went up to it. And that at first it looked like the second guy because they saw it, knocked on it, looked up and said, surely this is from God. Like, but then instead of coming up with their own idea and building a thatched hut around it, they just prayed and they said, God, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea what this is. And God answered their prayer and gave them a power tool. And they started driving rivets into this I beam. And God started working with them to like figure out how to work with steel. And as they started doing this, they started climbing up and building using power tools. And then you zoom back out to heaven and you see there's people like that third guy at all over the world with power tools on all of those I-beams. And they're building a superstructure that from any one point you can't see it, what's going on, but it's something that's going to encompass the whole earth. And to me at the time, it was a message to the church. And it was like the old school church versus the super church versus people that are building, that are like kingdom minded, that are thinking bigger outside of their borders of their nation, and that are thinking like heavenly solutions to the whole earth, like level thinking. And I was like, man, I want to be a Christian like that. Like, I don't want to just build my thatched hut around something or talk crap about something I don't understand. I want to like
Hmm.
be part of that bigger thing that extends
Hmm.
beyond all borders, right? But as I've gone on, this was 15 years ago that we had that. I was like thinking like, what else? Like, I saw all these other parallels, and I was thinking like, man, at the time of that vision, like Web 2 was barely getting going. And when you think about like the internet revolution and what's happened in the last 20 years, kind of going from Web 1, Web 2 to Web 3, I see another parallel there, right? Is like that decentralization and that empowerment of the user to be part of global systems that are bigger, stronger, more robust. Bitcoin didn't exist when that vision happened. Um, so many of these crypto, Bitcoin, decentralization ideas weren't even on the map, and now we have an opportunity to like kind of build our own superstructures that can, in some ways, supersede the tyrannical control of the thatched hut builders that want to just take the power of the internet, take the power of space and satellites, and use it to control their own little circus tent that encompasses their little territory. And can we be that third kind of person? And so like I feel like my entire adult life since that, it's like I've been attracted to that third kind. And I think that's
Hmm.
why you resonate with me, Zuby, is like I look at you and the way you think, and you're not nationalistic. You think from an elevated perspective, and you're building things that are universal in impact. And I'm like, he's the third kind. He's the third kind of dude. And
I'll
and,
do my
and
best.
I'm trying to be that third kind of dude. And so I don't know where I'm going with that. I just think that like maybe there's something there to these other emerging technologies. Maybe there's something there to what God's wanting to do on this earth. But I
Hmm.
think what you're seeing when you travel nation to nation and just meet, like, we didn't know each other from anybody yesterday, and we just had this great conversation today. But there's a reason I'm here right now, and there's nothing's by accident, and there's no such thing as coincidences. And I think
Hmm.
that um, there's something in the air of just like we're gonna find each other, and we're gonna
Cool.
do work together, and we're gonna make this world better, and we're gonna overcome the thatched hut bullcrap and build
Hmm.
something that lasts.
That's awesome, man. And what a way to end it right there, man. Clint, what's the best place for people to find you online?
It is probably my Twitter. If they're on there at Clint Fiore, CLINT FIORE, and then my business is TexasBusinessBuyers.com. So people that are into buying or selling small businesses, that's what we do, and we're happy to be resources there. But in general, just hope that uh, one of the challenges or one of the insights that we've been able to share together has been encouraging to somebody today, and that people will just keep being that third kind of person and going for it, and creating their own little chain reactions of kindness and all that. But man, it means a lot to you to lend your stage to a guy like me, because I just really look up to you, man, and I really look up to uh, how you put yourself out there and the impact you're making. So I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, Clint. Thank you so much, man. You're doing a great job. So keep killing it on all fronts, man. Appreciate you.
Okay, man. Take care.